Hi, guys, and welcome back to Calling Them Out. I am your host, Nefertari, and today I am going to talk about our identities because it's something that we all have, but many people still want to find out what theirs is. And so I'm going to call out the lies going on in society surrounding our identities and what people are telling you about who you are or how to discover who you are. And so I'd like to start with a question, if you don't mind. My question is, would you rather that somebody told you who you were, or would you rather discover it on your own? So would you rather have somebody tell you your identity, or you discover it and determine your identity on your own time? We're going to let that question sit for a while, and then we're going to dive right into identity and what the world is saying. I'm going to come back to that. Let it resonate with you while we're going through this, because I do have an answer to it, and what I think is what people would prefer, but I'm going to get to it and I'll tell you why I think what I think. So, our identity. Many people believe today that it is something that is ever changing. It is not constant. And you can grow into your identity. You can shift identities. It can change. It is a very transient thing. I think that's a lie. I do believe that we may take on other roles in life, but I do believe that we have a set identity. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you see in the world. I just saw something by Simon Sinek. He said very boldly that he believes his identity is not in his job, it's in who he is as a person. And that's how it should be for all of us. And I said, well, he is correct, but that is failing to address the next issue there, right? Who you are. Well, what if you don't know who you are? He is right. Your identity is not supposed to be in your job. It's supposed to be in who you are, but what if you don't know who you are? And so this is a problem that many people in their 20s suffer from, but many people even throughout life. This is where you get quarter life crises now and then the midlife crisis. But there are even elderly people who suffer from an identity crisis as well. And we'll talk about why this happens. So what do we put our identity in to begin with? It is strange. They are in many of our, the things that we put our identity in are superficial. And as I said, they are temporary. So nowadays we are putting our identity, number one, primary that you see is people's jobs. Most people, especially in America, when you meet somebody, you'll ask them their name and then you'll ask them what they do. It's just like, and so you are your job. What if you hate your job? It's got to really suck for your identity now, doesn't it? Another thing that people put their identity in are titles. And so when I say a title, it could be any kind of title. It could be a boss. I also consider titles to be mother, father, child. And I'm going to get back to them in a second. I'm just going to go through the things that people put their identities in. Their race, gender. Nowadays, we're getting so wild, your food preferences. You have people identifying as vegetarians, vegans, paleo, carnivores. We've gone even wilder, and now people are identifying as by their sexuality. And so some of these things are constant, and some of them are temporary, and some of them are just aspects of who we are as people. So I find that, like, specifically like food preferences and our sexuality, I think that it demotes us as human beings to be identifying by those things. Like, I know a guy who regularly, he will be like, well, like being a gay man. And I'm like, he identifies this way? And then I met another guy who was like, well, being a black gay man. I was like, what is this? You are reducing yourself as a person. Sexuality is something that everybody has. Even if you're asexual, it's still a part of humankind. And then for somebody to be identifying as like a whole lifestyle based on the food that you eat, everybody has to eat. These are things that really what they are is they're labels. And so what we've done is we're living in this labeling nation. And the reason we're doing it is because we're trying to find our people. Isn't that what everybody says now? Find your people. You'll find your people. And let's talk about, when people go from high school to college, because that's a very interesting time because a lot of people get really, really lost in their 20s, right? And there is a very specific reason why. Because life has been very structured up until that point. So you've gone to school and you go from classroom to classroom, and sometimes you're in the same class with the same kids for a long time, especially when you're in grade school. And so you make friends, and many people, their identities are formulated by who their friends are. And maybe if that person has a stronger identity, or maybe they've discovered something before you, what will happen is you will take on the language, maybe some of the clothing, the way they dress, the way they style themselves, the music that they listen to, of the people who are around you. So that might just be based on like personality, because some people have stronger personalities than others. Some people are natural influencers. I don't mean influencers like today. I mean, some people just have a tendency to influence other people. So they may be the ones who are, given the trends for their group. And so this is what happens a lot in high school and also in college. And then what happens? You graduate and you go out into the world, and then maybe your friends move, maybe you move, and maybe now you're alone. Maybe now you have to get a job and now you feel out of place. Maybe you're the youngest person in your job. And so you're like, wow, I don't identify with these people. I don't have anything in common with them. But you're most likely viewing it from a very superficial point of view. You're most likely just saying, well, I'm really young and I don't have anything. I just don't know. And then that's literally where people end. They're like, I just don't know. I don't know who I am in relation to these people. I don't know if I really like the things that I was doing before. Maybe I just chose to do them because of the people that I was with. And then you start asking all of these questions. And this is what people in their 20s start doing. They start asking the questions of, why do I do the things that I do? Am I even interested in these things? And so this is where you start saying, I don't know who I am as a person, and I don't know my identity. And so some people believe that over time you will figure out your identity through experiences. I will say yes, but also no. Yes, what I personally believe, I think that if you go through experiences, if you knew who you were as a person, those experiences would be different. They could add value or detract from your life. I don't think that they would shift you in a massive way if you already know who you are. You'll be able to enjoy those experiences from like a more confident point of view, as opposed to people who go off and have experiences specifically so that they can learn things about themselves. One of the things that I also mentioned that we put our identity in are titles. And I called them titles because they're more like roles, but you'll get people who will be like, I'm a mother, or I'm a father, or you're a child. This is true. But the issue is there's people who they've had so many kids, and then their kids leave the house, and then they become empty nesters, and they go through a crisis of identity, because they're like, I've been doing this for I've been taking care of kids for 20 something years. And just like that, my kids are gone. They're adults. Who am I as a person? Maybe all that time, that parent wasn't really spending much time on themselves. They were fully devoting themselves to their kids. And so they have an identity crisis. Or then there's also, you go from being a single person to being a spouse. I would say it is a role. Yes, there are changes. And yes, you can now identify as a spouse. Like, I'll just say go for the woman because I'm a woman. I can identify as a wife, but that doesn't mean that my identity is in being a wife. Okay? You can identify as a father, but that doesn't mean that your identity is being a father. You are more than that. That is one aspect of who you are. Some people make those things into who they are as a person. And so when it's taken from you, you just don't know who you are, and you're lost. And so that's why you shouldn't be putting your identity in any of those things, any of them. You should definitely not be putting your identity into a job. Many people have done this. What if you're fired and you have to make a transition? And you're like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't know anything else. Okay. You weren't grounded in who you are as a person. If you have a solid identity, then you should be able to navigate through different roles in life and still not lose your sense of self. I have even met people who they're identifying by various sexualities at different times. And it's just like, you have a sexuality. We all do. There's no need for you to one day say, oh, I was a heterosexual, now I'm gay, and then you know what, now I'm bisexual. This is not necessary. Aspects of a human person should not become who you are as a whole. Don't take something that's very small and make it into something very large. And so that's what we're doing with identity today. We're labeling ourselves as certain things. And so the question becomes, well, how do you discover who you are then? If it's not based on these things, then how do you find out who you are? That's why I asked, do you think that it's easier, or would you prefer if somebody told you who you were over discovering who you were? Because if somebody told you who you were when you were younger, couldn't you be more successful at a younger age? If somebody told you who you were when you were like, I don't know, 10, then wouldn't you be like, oh, I'm going to grow up to be this person? And then by the time you're 20, you're already doing your job. This was kind of what happened years ago, when they didn't have all of the overwhelming options that we have today for jobs. So if your parent was a carpenter or a seamstress, that is what you would do. Well, most likely it was usually men. So, or you would send your child off to be an apprentice of somebody at a young age. And so you'd be like, oh, my dad's a farmer, I'm going to be a farmer. And so everybody kind of knew what they were going to be, but there weren't all these like little nuanced jobs that we have today. You know, you weren't going to be like a graphic designer or work in marketing or, whatever it is. We have so many technical jobs that nobody tells you about in school. So we just have an overwhelming amount of options. So putting your identity in a job is crazy because most people don't even stay with the same job in their lifetime. But also, because those people had more of a structure years ago, they were just like, oh, I already know what I'm going to become. So there wasn't like this, oh, I'm so lost. They weren't really as lost as we are today. Somebody told them, well, you're going to be just what your father was. That's how it is. So I believe, personally, that if somebody told you what you were, that you would prefer it, even though in America you will claim that you would not, because Americans were all about like our freedom and we want to do what we want and nobody tells me what to do. But I'm going to propose this to you. I'm just going to propose a little setup for you to see what I'm going to say. Okay, listen. What if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I know something about you. I know who you are. You might be like, I don't know who you are. Well, I know something about you. Be like, do you want me to tell you what I know about you? If you don't know this person, you may have absolutely no interest. To be like, no, I don't even know who you are. I don't even care. They're like, oh, okay. Well, I thought maybe you would be interested. And now they say that, and you're like, oh, well, I mean, what do you know? Oh, well, hey, I don't want to impose. I don't want to tell you something about yourself if you don't want to hear it. No, no, now you're really interested, right? And you're not like, no, well, what is it that you know about me that I don't know about myself that's so interesting? Okay, tell me. And so then they tell you, oh, well, I heard that you are actually royalty. And you're like, what? Yeah. So you have, in like a lineage, you're like ancestors or something, or were royalty in Russia. Let's just throw out a country. And you're like, really? Just like that, in your mind, I guarantee 100% your wheels are rolling. And you would love to get online and you'd be like, what does a prince get or a princess get in life? And like, what am I entitled to? Am I going to be rich? Right? You're super duper excited. Why? Because somebody told you something exciting about you. They didn't tell you that, you had like a lower class job. They told you you were royalty. Now you might say, this is ridiculous setup, but it's in books and it's in movies. The Prince and the Pauper is based on this. The Princess Bride is based on this. One of my favorite animes of all time has this, and I'm actually going to share it because it goes into this perfectly. And I'm not really ruining anything. The anime has been out for years. So the anime is Magi, and there is a boy in it, and his name is Alibaba. And when you meet him, he does look kind of fly, but a lot of those anime characters do. But he starts fighting with people, and people immediately comment on the fact that he fights like a prince. They're like, this guy doesn't look like a prince, but he fights like a prince. And then you find out that he is one of these people. He was poor, and then a chariot shows up at his door, and they're like, oh, so, you're a prince. Pulls him out of obscurity, and he goes to live in a palace. And then what happens? His entire life changes. So what happens? His old identity goes away, and he has a whole new identity. But so now what happens? You have to live according to this identity. And so now that you know that you're in this space, he learns all of this stuff about what it is to be a prince, and he learns how to fight like a prince. And so this is the kind of stuff, this is why I believe that if somebody knew an identity for you and it was something better than you have for yourself, you would be like, sure, absolutely, definitely, tell me about it. And that's the problem that I think is going on today. We are here trying to figure ourselves out. And our parents, I'm not blaming parents. I could actually just all the generations, everybody's generation, their parents. Nobody is setting us up for success. Nobody's helping us to move on to the next generation and excel. So our 20s, people will say that your 20s are you're meant to explore. But at the same time, they're like, but you've got big decisions to make in your 20s. You've got to find out who you are. You've got to find out the job that you want to have for your life. You got to find your spouse. You got to make enough money to get a house. I mean, it's wild. All while discovering who you are. And they're like, get that person who you want to be with. So now you have to date somebody at the same time you don't know who you are. I think this is highly problematic. I think this is a lot of pressure, and it's why so many people feel very overwhelmed. And this is also why I think what pops up with people is now they have this idea because the world's telling you that, you're supposed to be something amazing and that you are amazing. You just don't know it yet, but you're going to discover it in your 20s, and you're busy with doing all this learning. And then you start suffering imposter syndrome, right? Because you're just like, I don't have all of these skills, and I don't know all these things that apparently society's telling me that I'm supposed to have or do. And so you start getting really worked up. This whole, imposter syndrome and overwhelming feelings start taking place. And so I want to read what I found on the Imposter Syndrome Institute's website about what it is to have imposter syndrome. They said a few different things. It's an unrealistic, unsustainable notion of what it means to be competent. An unhealthy response to failure, mistakes, setbacks, and constructive feedback. The false belief that if we were really competent, intelligent, qualified, we'd feel confident 24/7. And then they said, the bottom line is, unlearning imposter syndrome starts with being informed. And I said to myself, what is all of this? An unhealthy response? How did we even get an unhealthy response? The false belief? What do you mean the false belief? Did somebody tell us a lie that we're now trying to unlearn? Unlearning imposter syndrome starts with being informed. Informed about what? Informed about some lies that people told us about who we are as a person? And you'll get a lot of people when it comes to identity, what they'll tell you is, well, you need to tell yourself who you are. You need to give yourself these positive affirmations and say, this is who I am as a person. This is problematic. So the opposite of the imposter syndrome is Dunning-Kruger effect. So imposter syndrome has a tendency to lean towards, being underconfident or not believing that you deserve something. The Dunning-Kruger effect is overconfidence and believing you're greater than you really are. Humans, we seem to have this ability to sway from one way to the other, and we completely miss the middle. So you have people who don't think that they're worthy of anything, and then you have people on the other side who are entitled. And that it's just so very strange. Both sides seem to lack self-awareness. Both sides seem to not know who they are as a person. The Dunning-Kruger effect seems to upset people because when you meet a person who's overconfident, it's wild. People will say that, you're supposed to tell yourself who you are. These people are. These people are saying a lot of really great things about themselves. I think that these people, their affirmations go to their head way better than most people's. I met a guy who suffers from this. And he suffers from this so bad. He was telling me some stuff, and I said to him, dude, if I had half the confidence that you have, I would be flying high in life with half of your confidence. And he chuckled, not like a hearty chuckle. I wasn't being sarcastic. I was being serious with him. The problem, though, is that he's not successful. He's one of those super duper confident people that's not successful. And that's why he only right? It was not one of those hearty laughs. I think he realized what I was trying to say to him. But, I wasn't trying to be rude to him. I was just saying. So, why is it that people seem to lack self-awareness? People will tell you, as I said, the affirmations, do meditation, read all these self-help books, sit there and write a list of all your passions. Look, a lot of this stuff is very temporary, as I said. And when you go through life, a lot of these things change and your preferences change. And marriage is failing for many people because people have accepted this. They go, oh, well, people change. So, and people change and they grow apart. Well, what if you had a solid identity? And so you always had yourself a nice little anchor so you could maybe learn things and kind of grab things and add things to your identity. They would just become aspects of who you are, as opposed to your whole identity moving around and swinging from side to side. So when you're in a relationship and a person's like, I don't know you anymore because you've changed so much, that shouldn't happen. If you know who you are and you're solidly anchored, then, as I said, you just tack on new things and you add, you learn some stuff, but you shouldn't fundamentally change as a person that much. Growth does not mean you have moved and people can't recognize you. I'll just use myself as an example. When I was younger, I was really, to me, the way I look at myself, I'm just an older version of my younger self. That's literally how I view myself. I said, "Oh, I can see little me. I can see little Neff in me today." Uh, I was friends with a girl when I was younger. I saw her maybe like 15 years later. And a lot of people get really intimidated when they meet me as a grown woman, as opposed to, young Neff. I have grown. And so I thought it was strange what she said to me. I was laughing and she said, she goes, I was really worried that you were going to be different, but you're like the same person. She goes, you have the same laugh. You're the same. She goes, you're the same Neff. And I just looked at her and I was like, well, yeah, why would I not be? Uh, as I said, I've grown, I have learned things, I have tacked things on, but I've had a very solid identity ever since I was a child. I do very much know who I am. Yes, there is work to do. You should, I personally don't find anything wrong with a personality test, and I'm not going to sit here and name any, but I don't really find anything wrong with them. I don't think that you need to put your hope in them and put yourself in little brackets and say, I am an ENTJ and that's what I am. No, I think those are all tools and you can learn things about yourself, still not your identity. Don't sit there and say, I am this Myers-Briggs, this is who I am. That makes you very, very rigid, and that that hasn't been around since all of mankind. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Go back in time and try and label everybody else in the world? And I've looked at them. They're just too rigid for you to sit there and say something like that about yourself. So, where do we go from here, right? So how do you determine your identity? That's why you're here. As I said, I think it's more powerful when somebody says something to you, if somebody tells you your identity. Now, I'm not telling you that you should go out and you should ask people who you are as a person, but it has a massive effect on who you are. I know it does, and you know it does, and I don't need to show you any sort of scientific proof because you know this in your life. When a kid grows up, identity formation, what your parents say to you really helps. It really shapes you as a person, which is why some people grow up with serious limiting beliefs. Some kids grow up and they flourish because they had parents who showered them with love. Other kids grow up and, they're on the rougher side of life. Some kids grow up and their parents didn't make them have any kind of responsibilities. Those kids have a tendency to be a failure to launch. So a lot of these things comes with your parenting, but you can still break free from those because that's not where your identity is set in. Now, you'll have psychologists who will try and tell you, you are worthy, you are better than that. Those were lies. Some people don't believe them. And I think that they're not wrong to not believe it. I don't think that they're wrong because who is this psychologist? Who is this therapist? They don't know you. Your parents is the one who raised you. And so there are some kids or some people who, as they get older, they're like, oh, my parents always thought I was a loser, so I think I'm a loser. They said I was stupid, and so I think I'm stupid. And then your therapist will be like, no, you're not stupid. And there are some people who will literally in their mind be like, who is this therapist? This therapist doesn't know me. They haven't tested me. So how do they know if I'm stupid or not? They don't know what my IQ is. They're just saying something. So we all believe that there's a certain level of truth that we're looking for to refute somebody's lie or to refute a limiting belief that somebody has imposed upon us. The Dunning-Kruger effect that I mentioned before, where these people who are overconfident, where does that seem to come from? They don't, maybe, I think many people have taken it from therapists and self-help books and all these positive affirmations telling you that you are something greater than you are. And so these people look at themselves and they don't have to change anything about themselves. And they're just like, I am worthy. I am great. I know maybe you haven't met them, but I've definitely met them. I have met guys in my past who would ask me out. It wouldn't matter if they worked out. It wouldn't matter if they were a smoker. It wouldn't matter if they had loads of debt or they had no job. They would ask me out. And I would look at them, sketch, and be like, no. And then they would be like, I know my worth. And I was like, why am I hearing this stupid line? I know my worth. I know my value. No, you don't. These people are very hard to tell them you don't know your value. You don't just deserve to date anybody out there. So where are they getting these beliefs from? Other people. They're getting them from books. There's no truth in them, but they're getting them from somebody. So we have to be centered in some form of truth about who we are as people. So how do we get here? This is the real meat of it. If you have enjoyed anything up to this point in time, though, you are more than welcome to drop a comment or anything. If you disagree with me or if you agree with me, let me know. So if you have stayed with me up until this point, this is when we're going to get into the real meat of this. So I think we need to go back to the beginning of like mankind, right? How can you know where we are going if you don't know where we came from and who you are? These are the important questions that we should be asking in life. How can you know what kind of job you want if you don't know what you like and who you are? So the real question is who are humans? And in America, what we've done is I believe that we've stripped people of a lot of hope. We've stripped people of purpose and meaning, but then we try and bring it back in like these self-help books and therapy and everything else. And I think it's leaving people in a serious state of confusion, and they have every right to be so. You have every right to be confused because it doesn't make any sense. A lot of it is contradictory. So the belief system in America, and I have heard people who I don't even think they do any sort of research, but they believe in evolution. I have heard people say that they believe that we were some sort of amoeba years ago, or we have literally evolved from some sort of Neolithic ape or Neanderthal. And we're very close to being animals, if not animals ourselves. And I think this is very demoralizing and also dehumanizing. I think it takes away the dignity of being a human, the dignity from humankind. And that would probably lead to us not really valuing ourselves, even though society is trying to tell us that we should value ourselves. And so, I mean, I think people are presented with things and they just accept them, even though they claim that they are asking questions. But I ask questions, and I have asked a lot of questions about evolution. I was like, I don't get it. I said, what evolved? What evolved first? A man or a woman? So was there like a male ape and a female ape? But then we all evolved from the same amoeba. So why did it decide and when did it decide? But then evolution doesn't decide that something would split and make a male species and then a female species. But then it claims that we are all probably coming from the same source. So then my question is, were there multiple Neanderthals that were breaking off and be evolving into humans at the same time and then procreating? And so these are the questions, right? If that sounded confusing to you, I think it's confusing. And not only that, I couldn't find any set answers. I couldn't figure out, I said, how did we split from an amoeba to a human? But how do you have kids? Where did the male and female come from? I don't get it. And so if this is a belief system that you hold, personally, I believe that most people haven't done enough research on it. They haven't asked enough questions on it. And so we only have two options. If you've ever taken a philosophy class, there's only two real running options. The third option is still the second option. The option has to be that we were created from some sort of source or from a god, but we were created. The other option is evolution or creation. That's it. Philosophy has given us two options. And I think that if you go with the evolution route, you live a very sad reality, and I can't tell you how you have purpose. with evolution. And there are many people who have gone online who says, it's not about purpose, you don't need to know it, but somehow in your heart, you feel like you want to have meaning. And somebody, because they can't give you meaning, will just say, we don't have any meaning. It's about having fun. It's a free for all, but it just doesn't sit right with us. And so the search and the quest for meaning continues. And so the search for your identity also continues. And so what if somebody did create you, and this being, this source, loved you? What if it said that, I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. So whoever made us was benevolent. Could that be possible? I think that if we have a benevolent creator, then life makes a little bit more sense. And then having an identity makes more sense for us. Because then our identity would then come from our creator, right? And so then if our identity comes from a creator, then we would know who we are from the beginning, or once we get to know who that creator is. And then we can act from that, as opposed to living a life and then trying to discover who we are as a person and making actions from a place that's not of ourselves. So James Clear said in Atomic Habits, he says, your identity is the most powerful force in your life. It determines your habits, influences your decisions, and predicts your future. Who you are determines how you act and behave. Everything stems from your identity. And so I would like you to switch a belief system. I would like you to believe something today. If you have never thought about it before and you are finally being presented with it, I would like you to believe that you were created as opposed to evolved from nothingness. I would like you to believe that you were created by a benevolent creator. You were created for a purpose. You weren't created for nothingness. So if you go back and you're like, well, if I was created, why would somebody create me? This is a good question. So I really love art. Ask an artist, why do you ever make something? Artists like to create things. All humans really like to create things. Creativity is something it's infused into who we are as beings. We want to make things and enjoy them. You wish to enjoy them. And so what if I said to you that we were created in the image of our creator? We were supposed to reflect who made us. So it says in Genesis 1:27, let us make man in our own image. In the image of God, we were created, male and female, he created them. So both men and women are created in the image of God. And so this gives us who we are. But it also says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So here we got ourselves some purpose too. We were created with purpose. So our identity comes from the fact that we were created by a God who created us in his image to be a reflection of him. And then he created us with purpose. So with that in mind, wouldn't you want to know who this creator is so that you could learn more about yourself? Because now you don't have to do this discovery all on your own, right? Life isn't just this open world game where you just get to explore and, make all sorts of mistakes. But the difference between an open world game, video game, and our life is that you don't get a do-over. You just keep on aging. So don't you want to take advantage of the life that you have? And our lives are actually quite short if you really think about it. It's weird. It feels long, but then short at the same time. I feel like sometimes I'm behind, but then I'm like, oh, I'm actually really quite young, but then I still feel like I'm behind. But what if you just knew who you were going forward? And so you could now discover who your creator is. And by discovering this, you could then discover his purpose for your life and who you are. And now you can navigate life with this identity, knowing that you were made for a specific reason. Now you don't have to find out this reason on your own. You don't have to sit there and find out your purpose on your own. You can go find out from your creator, right? And apparently if he created you, then he wanted to have some sort of relationship with you, a personal relationship with you. And so there's another ideology that goes on in the identity world, and it's that you can just change your identity, right? That you can have an identity shift. You can become something else. If you don't like what you are, you can just set a goal and then think about what that would entail and then become this new person. Why do I mention this here? Because God claims that yes, you can. You can have a new identity. So the idea of an identity shift is actually not really new to us. God said that we can. He will give us a new nature. So you can call it an identity, a personality, your character. But literally, if you don't like things about yourself now, and you're just like, I wish I wasn't like this. How many people date somebody? This is why I love relationships. Relationships are honest, even when they're dishonest. They're honest like on the outside. People will say that they're inherently good. They will get in a relationship with other people. And then these people, the guy and the girl, they will sit there and they will talk trash about the other person. They'll be like, this person is selfish. This person is, they don't care about me at all. They don't show me any love. They don't spend any time with me. And it's amazing. All this stuff will just go on and on and on. And then maybe this person will break up with you and you'll be like, wow, this person told me all of these bad characteristics about myself. I gotta get into my self-improvement. I must make a difference. And then you get out your checklist of your self-help to-do list, and that's what you do. But if your identity comes from God, he can actually change these things for you. What? Right? The whole self-help world tells you that you must make all these changes to yourself. And you know what? You get tired, you get overwhelmed, you're exhausted. You're like, man, I've been ticking these boxes. I've been doing my yoga, my meditation. I've been saying my mantras. I'm so tired. And in addition to my job and taking care of my pets or kids or whatever, and it just becomes too much. But God is your creator, and he claims that he can give you a new nature. Amazing, isn't it? So it's called an identity in Christ. It's when you believe that Jesus Christ is your creator, is your Lord, your Savior. And so you can shake off this old nature only by him and then have a new nature, have a new character. And so let me just tell you, just so you can see just what this new identity could be, right? It says, don't lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on this new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. So you were made. And so now if you're being renewed in Christ, your whole mind can have this mindset shift, but it's not just a mindset shift. You're getting rid of an old self and you're putting on a new self. And I was looking at these characteristics of this new self. I'm going to read them to you right now. If you wouldn't think about these things for yourself, this is definitely what you would want in a friend, or definitely what you would want in a significant other. Okay. So it says, put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. And as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. all of that was just so nice and so uplifting. And that's the new nature that Christ wants to put in your life. So that's the only way I've seen a person fully transform. I mean fully. I don't just mean losing weight or getting a new job or getting money. I'm talking an inside out, complete new person. So I said for myself, I was the same person as a child as I am now. I was also, I believed in Jesus Christ when I was a little kid. That's why. I have met people who have accepted Jesus as their savior as an adult. I mean, a totally new person. I'm talking people who used to be alcoholics and who used to curse all the time, guys who used to treat women with utter disrespect. And I'm talking like overnight, they're like, I don't want to do those things. Now, I'm not saying that they don't haunt them. I'm not saying that they're not in their minds, but they don't want to do those things. They're like, that's not who I am anymore. I know this guy, he accepted Jesus as his savior, 35 years old. And he told me about his past life. And this guy was like crying to me. He was like talking about my life before. He goes, I sound like such a dirtbag. He goes, and I feel so much better about who I am as a person now. And I think it's really wonderful to know that your identity doesn't come from the things that you do, and it doesn't come from your role in life. It doesn't come from what society tells you that you are, but it comes from your maker, and that your maker and your creator, God, is telling you that he can change you if you accept his son, Jesus Christ, as your savior. And so all this long list of things that the world is telling you that you have to do to become a better person, to have this identity shift, Christ says, I'll just do it for you. I have done it for you when I died on the cross for you. And so that counters all those lies that we're hearing in society. Your identity does not come from anything that you do. So when somebody tells you that you are valued, they are telling you the truth. But now you have a foundation. Now you have an anchor for that. And Jesus is your anchor. You can say, yes, I know I am valuable. You don't have to be overconfident and you don't have to be underconfident. You're like, oh, I know who I am. This is how I am. I know who I am. Somebody could say something to me and be like, I don't think you're that special. I didn't ask you. And I'm not overconfident. And I'm not full of myself or conceited. No, I just know who I am. That's what I would love for you. I would love for everybody to just know who they are in Jesus Christ. Because that's where you get your identity. That's who you get your identity from. And so that is your identity. That's tackling the lies of your identity. And you hopefully, most likely, you should not have an identity crisis afterwards. But if you are interested, I didn't really go into the gospel or any of that in this video. I'm not telling anybody I know many people have been hurt by religion. I'm not a religious person. So I'm not telling you about a religion. I'm telling you about your creator and your savior, Jesus Christ. No religion. No religion. I'm telling you about a person who has changed history. Okay? So whatever you have heard before, maybe you haven't heard the full story. Maybe you didn't know you were loved. I have included some past videos. I have explained what it is to be a real, authentic follower of Jesus Christ. If that is something that you are interested in, I would advise you to watch those videos later. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you learned something. Let me know. Bye, guys. And let's see what you can do. Is it just for sure?